Hello guys, welcome to the next video in my SPV3 analysis series where I take a look at the Covenant as they appear in SPV3 and compare them to how they appear in other Halo games, with this episode being focused on the Brutes. How do they differ from Halo 2, Halo 3, and Halo Reach Brutes? Let's find out. So kicking this video off with the Brute Miners of SPV3, here they are, and I love these guys. And what I really enjoy about these guys is it's really hard to pin down the exact inspiration for the look of the Brutes of SPV3. It's not quite Halo 2 or Halo 3 or Halo Reach, it's kind of a mix of all of them, and I love that, and you're going to see that a lot throughout the Brutes of SPV3. But looking at the miner here, the first thing that caught my eye was the skull cap helmet, and how that's just straight up the skull cap helmet that the Brute miners wear in Halo 3. But really looking at the rest of his armor, that's not Halo 3 Brute Miner armor at all. That's really looks like the Brute armor from Halo 2. And after talking to the lead dev of SPV3, he said that really their initial look for the Brutes that they wanted to have in SPV3 was Halo 2. They wanted all the Brutes to look like the Halo 2 Brutes, but they decided to add some Halo 3 elements, and that's what you're seeing here with the Brute Miner. I think these look really cool because it's really mixing really what are like two of my favorite looks for the Brutes of Halo 2 and Halo 3, throwing that look together, and that's what you get when you look at the Brute Miner of SPV3. I love the way these guys look. You can really see the Halo 2 inspiration for the look if you look at these guys without their helmets, but really when you're looking at them without their helmets, the first thing that catches your eye is the big giant red eyes. I never really thought about the Brute's eyes being red before until I was doing this video, but they are red. But SPV3 takes it to the next level, gives them big beady red eyes that you can really see through their armor. I love it. Let's move on to the next Brute. So moving on to the Brute captains of SPV3, here they are, and once again I love the way these guys look. I love, just like how the Brute Miner is really hard to nail down the main inspiration, it's the exact same for the Brute Captain as well. I love the beady red eyes peeking through the Brute Captain's helmet. It gives a really menacing look and just really looks like a beast that's out to get you. I love the way these guys look, but really diving into his armor inspirations, the helmet I love to start out with first really is the Halo 3 Brute Captain helmet. That rhino look that we all know and love, that's here, but but looking at the rest of his armor is where it really gets interesting, because if you look at the Brute Captain from Halo 3, he's covered head to toe in armor, just like the Brute Miner. But this Brute from SPV3, this Brute Captain, really has more armor from the Halo 2 Brute than anything else, which is really kind of strange, because when you think of the Brute Captain, you generally think of them being covered in armor with a really badass looking helmet. That's not the case here. He's got the Halo 2 bandolier, he's got the Halo 2/Halo Reach shoulder armor with the spikes on top, and even his leg armor is different than the leg armor of the Brute Captain of Halo 3. It's actually, what's kind of neat is on his legs, it looks like his armor is really similar to the armor on his shoulders, just flipped upside down. It's a really good look. He's got those shin wraps that you see in the Brutes in Halo Reach and Halo 2 as well. You don't really see that on the Brutes of Halo 3, but it's a great look. It's a really good clash of Halo 3 Brutes, Halo 2 Brutes, and Halo Reach. But what's really crazy is that when you initially look at the Brute Captain at SPV3, the last thing I think about is the Halo 2 Brute, because I think it's that signature helmet. But really, I feel like the Halo 2 Brute is the biggest inspiration for this Brute, and that's really kind of cool for what is really a Halo 3 looking Brute, but just by looking at his helmet. That's just my thoughts. It looks great. Let's move on to the next Brute. Moving on now to the Brute Stalkers of SPV3, and if these guys look familiar, it's probably because they're reminding you of the Brute Stalkers from Halo 3, but I really prefer the Brute Stalker armor in SPV3, because I just feel like the armor is far more interesting looking, and it just looks far more menacing than the Stalkers did in Halo 3. I really like the Brute Chieftain inspirations that you see in their armors. Like, they got these tubes coming off their back, which is something you don't see with the Stalkers of Halo 3, but you see that with the Brute Chieftains, and that armored loincloth look that they have is something that's just pulled straight from the Brute Chieftains of Halo 3 and Halo Reach, and the armor that they have on their legs is just non-existent on the Brute Stalkers of Halo 3. I just feel like it's a far more interesting, menacing looking design. But my favorite thing about the Brute Stalkers of SPV3 is that if you are old like me and you remember obsessing over the Halo 3 Vidocs that were releasing before Halo 3 was released, like if you obsessed over those, you probably saw all the different drawings of the Brutes that were how they were going to appear in Halo 3, and it got you so excited. I feel like the Brute Stalkers of SPV3 are the descendants of some of those concept arts. Those concept arts look so cool, and there's always been a part of me that wished that the Brutes of Halo 3 looked more like that concept art, and there's some Stalker inspirations there, but I feel like the Stalkers of SPV3 captured that so much more than the Stalkers of Halo 3, and that's why I love the way the Stalkers looks in SPV3. But let's move on now to the Brute Chieftains of SPV3. The Brute Chieftain of SPV3 really caught me off guard, because I remember the first time I actually encountered a Brute Chieftain in SPV3. I remember it just completely blew my mind that not only are there Brutes in this mod, but there's there's Brute chieftains as well, and once again, they look fantastic, because what I love about all the Brutes of SPV3 is that it looks like they've taken some of the fan favorite armors and looks from all the Brutes for all the Halo games and just collide them together. If you look at this guy, obviously there's some Halo 3 Brute chieftain inspirations with the helmet that he's wearing that just looks like the Brute chieftain helmet from Halo 3, but if you look at his armor on his arms, the armor on his thighs, it's completely different. It's completely different, because when you think of a Brute chieftain in general, you just think of this big massive Brute that's covered in armor and head to toe, and it's that, but it's different than any other Brute chieftain we've ever seen before. I love that. That's why I love all the Brutes in this video. But as I mentioned earlier, I got to talk to the lead dev and ask him about what were some of the inspirations behind the Brutes of SPV3, and I really learned some really interesting stuff. For example, the color of the fur coats of the Brutes are different, because they had this idea that if you have a Brute captain or a Brute chieftain, he's a bit older than a Brute miner, so his hair actually starts to gray out, which is something that I noticed when I was playing, but knowing that it's not random, I just thought that was so freaking cool. But another thing that I love about these guys is that their weaponry is brutish, as you would expect. You know, but they're not just using the Brute weapons that you'd expect. Brute plasma rifles and spikers. These guys have Brute plasma pistols. They have the Brute shredder. The Brute chieftains are running around using hunter cannons. Great things that I would love to see in future Halo games like Halo Infinite. These guys are awesome. I just feel like it's like you take the best looks of the Brutes and their attributes of the Brutes, like their ability to be really brutal and torture Marines and hang them on totem poles. That's great stuff that we want to see in Halo Infinite, and it just feels like they've taken all these great things from the other Halo games, collided them together cosmetically, the way they act, the way they look and feel, and just giving you some of the best Brutes we've ever seen in Halo games. I love them all. It's great. I love them. They're awesome. But one thing that's always captured my curiosity of the Brutes of SPV3 is the fact that there are no Brutes in Halo Combat Evolved, so the devs probably went through hell to balance these Brutes into the Halo CE-ish sandbox of SPV3, and when I approached the lead dev of SPV3, Masters1337, and asked him about some of those challenges, his answers were so mind-bogglingly cool that I have to include them in this video, because what he said when it came to balancing the Brutes into SPV3 was the fact that if you had a Halo encounter within the sandbox where one elite would be too challenging for the player, if it felt like the elite would bog you down, they would substitute that one elite with 3 Brutes, and they'd each have a different weapon, one weapon designed to drain your shields, one to kill you when you had no shields, and another to have a Brute shot to kind of bombard you with artillery and to destroy vehicles. And that is just so freaking cool. And when you're actually playing SPV3, the Brutes feel like they're used so wisely, because anytime because you can kind of get through them pretty easily, because an individual Brute is not nearly as tough as an individual elite in SPV3, so having a section where you actually go through 3 Brutes as opposed to one elite and a Brute mixed with grunts and jackals, it just freshens up the gameplay so much, because it's not just another elite. The elites and the Brutes play completely different SPV3 as they do in other Halo games, so having both of them in these sandboxes and using them in different ways is really freaking cool in SPV3. And just to know the mindset behind why you're encountering them there is because an elite would be too difficult. They wanted to challenge you, but not challenge you as far as having an elite that has recharging energy shields and so on and so forth. I just think that's so freaking cool, and I love it. That's the kind of stuff that I love finding out doing this series. But at the end of the day, guys, the Brutes of SPV3 are some of the best looking Brutes that you can find in any Halo game, and they're in this mod. I highly recommend you guys try this out. Thank you again, Masters1337, for giving me some of this insider knowledge that makes this video possible. And if you guys found yourself liking this video, be sure to drop a like on it, because it helps the video reach more Halo fans, and that's always a great thing, and I really appreciate it. I also make new Halo videos every single week, so be sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.